Hello, BookTube. It's Tuesday, and that means Tag Tuesday. There are a bunch of tags out there that I've been tagged on, a bunch that I haven't that still intrigue me. No tag at the moment is really going mega viral. That's always a lot of fun when suddenly a tag strikes everybody as just the thing they want to do on a Tuesday. But lots of them are still interesting, so I thought I'd get a couple done today. I was originally going to do only one, but then I was tagged in an original tag. And that's kind of a command performance. Micah Cummins over on his channel, which is rapidly climbing to BookTube dominance. In fact, if enough of you go over there now, you could get him to 1,000 subscribers before the weekend. He did his very first original tag. I felt I had to do it, especially since he tagged me. It's the eReader book tag. Micah is a fan of e-reading, and I think he tagged me because I know he knows I am as well. And all the questions are really about that. There's very little in the way of shelf hunting or preparation that you need to do. It's really just your story with e-reading, which I'm every bit as nosily curious to know as he is. So the first question is, what was the first e-reader you ever owned? What was your reason for getting one? Were you a reluctant convert or an eager one? And I ignored the first murmurs of e-readers for, oh my, a year, 2 years, something like that. I was at the time working in a retail bookstore in Boston. I was working at the Barnes & Noble at the Prudential Center, which does not exist anymore. It wasn't the first Barnes & Noble building that I worked in. The first one was a ramshackle old warehousey type thing in downtown Crossing, another area of Boston. That old store was wonderful. Despite the fact that it had exposed electrical wiring that sometimes sparked, that it was prone to floods, that it had a flaking asbestos, that it had a 200-year-old wooden elevator for carrying freight that often trapped employees between floors. The fact that it had no natural light. There was one window at the front of the store on the first floor, and that's it. Other than that, there were no windows. So if the power went out, I was the only one who could see anything if you weren't right near the windows at the front of the first floor. I loved it anyway. And I was there for years. And then that store closed, and the company decided to relocate all the employees, or at least to offer them relocation, offer them to go all of them over to the Prudential building and cover their hours. I want to pause on that for a minute because Barnes & Noble as a company would never do that now. They wouldn't even think about it. It would be so long, see you later. And I don't think a lot of companies would. A lot of retail companies, I'm not sure that a lot of them would anymore. That is a sign of a change in the time. But there was another sign in the change of the time that happened as a result of that shift. We, all of us, most of the old hands at the old store, carted up our belongings in our cardboard boxes with our cardboard belts and walked right over to the Pru. A big, state-of-the-art, clean, glass and steel, beautifully designed, modern space where we did not belong. The only thing that allowed us to make our way there is that we really, really knew our books. At the old store, in the old days, you absolutely had to know what you were talking about. You were going to get some very bookishly intelligent people coming in asking you questions. And the thing that changed, one of the things was that the company agreed to move everybody on their own dime. But another big thing that changed, the seismic thing that changed, was that the internet became ubiquitous. Suddenly it wasn't something that you could maybe access once in a while on the desktop computer at your office if you were particularly technically inclined. Your insurance company you wouldn't have a computer on your desk there. Once upon a time, it was that, but then it moved to everybody having a computer on their desk connected to the World Wide Web at work. And that was even before. We're not even talking about people having access to the web 24 hours a day on a device in their pockets. Once that happened, the organic need for the kind of bookstore that we were, large chunks of it went away. All of a sudden, a customer who just could not remember what was that book, didn't have time to go to the library and ask a librarian, didn't have any reference works in their office, didn't have any reference works in their home. Once upon a time, there was a Nobel winner who wrote about frogs. Can you help me out? Once upon a time, for years, they would go to our bookstore. And they would come to my information desk, but I had a lot of colleagues that also knew lots and lots about books. When that change happened, suddenly the customers didn't need to do that anymore. And so they still had reasons to come to bookstores, but they didn't have any reason to line up at an information desk. That, unless they needed you to do something for them, mail a book to a prison or something like that, they didn't have any reason for you to answer their questions. 9 out of 10 of their questions they could answer themselves. So when we all got to the new store, I was naturally parked at the information desk, but I knew fairly quickly that it wasn't the same information desk. It wasn't any fault of anybody. It wasn't a bad business decision on Barnes and Noble's part. It was just society changed. And one of the things that I realized pretty quickly is that since I love dealing with customers in a retail setting, I loved dealing with customers. The more, the merrier. The longest lines, great crowds of people all shouting questions at the same time. Give it to me. Give me more and more and more of that. I used to love that. Absolutely love it. And it, unbeknownst to me, became a defining requirement of me working in retail. And when I went over to the new store, I realized that wasn't happening at the information desk. That I would go an hour without without one single customer walking up to the information desk. Also, the old store had a reliable lunch rush from noon to 2. We were within walking distance of Boston's business district and a couple of big schools, so everybody went to lunch at either noon or 1, so we would get slammed between noon and 2 with customers. This new store didn't have anything like that. So I started looking around for places I could go in the store where there were the requisite number of customers for me to schmooze with. I wasn't interested in doing any kind of busy work. I wanted to schmooze with customers. Maybe let them know about things. You know, you work in a store, you start to know every little new addition, every nook and cranny that maybe they want to know about and don't have the time to find on their own. I noticed there were lines at the registers, so I broke down a 30-year habit and learned how to do the registers. Turns out the registers do most of the work, so that wasn't that big a catastrophe. But also at the time, around 2009, Barnes & Noble got into the electronic device market big time. They got sold a monorail. They went into it hugely. And as a result, for a little while there, 2009, 2010, 2011, there wasn't a dedicated Nook section at the front of the store. That's what they called the device, the Barnes & Noble Nook. And it got crowds of customers, I think in those first few years, just out of curiosity's sake. But it didn't matter to me. It mattered to me only where there were crowds of customers. So I went up to the Nook section, sort of foisted myself on the young woman who was running it. She was absolutely delightful and as patient as Job. She was able to walk me through the rudiments of this technology. At the time, I had no idea what it was. No idea even what she was talking about. I just kept smiling and nodding when she would talk about, Wi-Fi or 3G. I had no idea what she was talking about. But I learned to sort of tell what the devices were. I knew what electronic reading was before. I'd been to a couple of trade shows at MIT. So I knew the idea. You have an electronic version of a book that you can page through on a device. Back then, over a decade ago, I had no conception of the potential. I was really thinking of just calling up a text on a screen like you would on a desktop computer. But after a few months of selling those things, I used to love selling them. I used to love talking to customers about them, mainly because it gave me a chance to just question them about the shape of their own reading. When do you read? How much do you read at any one time? What do you read? That sort of thing. But after a few months of that, I realized, I probably should buy one of these things and actually use it on my own. At the time, I was proudly saying, well, I can talk about these things to customers and I can sell them to customers. But I would never use one on my own. I had, at the time, 6,000 books. And I had no. I said, I've already got a library. I don't need one of these devices. I'll never need one of these devices. But I got one. I got the first Barnes & Noble Nook. Not the original. Barnes & Noble came out with 2 models originally. One was an e-ink device, and one was slightly more advanced than that. I think it might have been the first Nook. Some of you may remember it. It was tall and white, and it had an e-ink screen, but it also had a bar, a color touchscreen bar at the bottom that you could use to navigate through the device. And I think it could go online as well, because I think you could get a 3G connection on that device, so that it would be online all the time. I got one of those. It was nice. I wished that I had it now. I started to play around with it. Again, back at home on the fainting couch, I started to play around with it, but always in a kind of tech curious way. I was never even vaguely considering that I would actually use it dedicatedly to read. I put it away when it was time to read. And that device is no longer with me, unfortunately. At the time, I had a beautiful, sleek, gracious, intelligent pointer and a fat, gassy, insane basset hound named Lucy, who I adored. And Lucy had a habit of waddling up. She never did anything quickly. She would waddle up to something that was within reach of her enormous head. Her head and her ears alone were bigger than my current dog. She would waddle up to something that was within reach of her, a spoon, a piece of mail, sometimes one of her toys that were specifically for that purpose, but usually not. She would waddle up to that thing. She would dimly examine what it was. She didn't understand anything at all. She couldn't put two and two together at all. And then she had this enormous mouth, this sort of smooshy, endless mouth. She would sort of ooze her mouth over the thing, pull it off the counter of wherever it was, waddle away with it, but never usually more than 10 or 20 feet, because that was too much effort. And her goal, the idea in her dim little brain when she was doing that, is that she was going to waddle away with it and chew on it. But that was always too much effort. So what my little hippo would do would be waddle off somewhere with it, leave it down, and then forget about it and wander off. I used to, so you would find things in separate rooms. You would know where you left it, but you would find it. It would be the same. It wouldn't be damaged at all, but you would find it somewhere else. I used to refer to her as the world's slowest poltergeist. And she did that with the Nook that I bought. She pulled it off the footlocker and waddled it off somewhere and laid it on the floor and then forgot about it. And then at some point later in the day, keep in mind, these were in the barbaric days when I had to leave her, when I had to leave my dogs to go to work. Sometime else during the day, she waddled in that general direction and stepped on it. It had a glass screen and it shattered into a million pieces just with her gigantic hippo hoof landing on it. It shattered into 1,000 pieces, so it couldn't be used anymore. But that was the earliest one that I had, and I wasn't at first a convert at all. It actually wasn't a dedicated e-reader that converted me to e-reading. It was my phone. It was an iPhone that I had. I read on the e-readers that I, played around with, but I loaded The Prime Minister by Anthony Trollope onto my phone, and one day I was out and about doing errands, and it was one of those days that just works against you. The day is conscious and it works against you. So you will touch the train or bus that you need just as it's pulling out with an hour to wait for the next one. You'll get close enough to touch it, but not to get on board. You'll get to the post office at an hour when it's usually completely deserted, and there'll be 75 people in line and one clerk who will look at the line of 75 people, finish up with the customer they're dealing with, and then put a sign right down on their counter saying, "Out to lunch," knowing perfectly well that there are no other clerks and that there are 75 people in line. They'll do it with a kind of hateful look on their face. The type of behavior that at the old bookstore, the old Barnes & Noble, I used to excoriate in employees, just excoriating them. I would jump on them right away, where I'd say, "Where are you going?" And they'd say, "It's my lunchtime. My lunch is at 11, the stroke of 11. I would say, "I can see from looking over your shoulder that you left the information desk unattended." "Yeah, it's my lunchtime." No, that's not how it works. You wait until you get replaced, and then you go to lunch. And you can take the extra time at the back end, but you don't leave the customers in a lurch. You don't do that for any reason whatsoever. And that if you encounter a day like that, there's no way to get around it. It's always going to be a day you can't just skip. And I did encounter one of those days, and I had Trollope on my phone, and I fell into the book. Completely fell into the book, which was the thing I thought e-readers could not do. And once I realized that, e-reading could not do. There's a little bit of categorical confusion in this tag, I think. Because we're talking here about dedicated e-readers. We can talk about devices that you can read on, like an iPad or a phone. But I want to concentrate on dedicated e-readers, at least for most of it. But anyway, that's just question number one. That was 15 minutes. Let's try and go a little faster. Question number two is, what e-reader do you use now / what e-readers do you own? I have some props. I have, like a good booktuber, I have some props. I have a lot of e-readers. I have the old Barnes & Noble Nook Simple Touch. Very basic device. Here, let me put this over here so I don't drop it. A very basic device, kind of rubberized back. The power button, power panel is up on the top there, completely inaccessible unless you want to press on it. It's got the page turn buttons. It's got the Nook home button there. So no matter where you are on the device, you can go home just by pressing that. I love it. I really love it as a device. Charges really fast, holds a charge forever. My only major problem with it is that it is very fussy about storage. You run out of storage space on this thing almost immediately in ways that you really shouldn't. In ways that I'm pretty sure I'm not completely understanding, because I seem to be running out of space a lot faster on these Nook Simple Touches. I have two of them than I should. But I don't argue with inanimate objects. But then I also have an older Nook, this thing here, which is kind of a Nook tablet. It had this neat little hinge here with a door underneath it for expandable memory. Also has the Nook home button there. I don't think this one has any power. There's a power button on this thing up on one side. The aesthetic choice for handheld devices, no, this thing's dead. The aesthetic choice for handheld devices now is to have all the sides clean as possible. The goal being eventually that all sides are clean of everything. All charging is done wirelessly. All headphones are done Bluetooth. But that wasn't true here. You have the power controls on one side, the battery or the power button on one side, the volume controls on the other. You've got the charging on the bottom there. I don't think there's a side here. Yeah, and the headphone jack on top. So on this old Nook Color, there's not one side of the device that's clean. Whereas that is not the current design ethos at all. Then I have this thing. This is a little Amazon. It's not a dedicated e-reader. It's a full working tablet. It's just a small blockish thing that I haven't quite warmed to it. I don't know if this has any power either. Probably not. The full color tablet-like devices, you put them on a shelf and forget about them. When you come back, they're going to be dead, which won't be true about a dedicated e-reader. An e-ink reader will almost certainly have life in it. Okay, yeah, this is a Kindle Fire, but a very basic one, not the larger, not the flatter one. This might be old, but you can read ebooks on it. I haven't really done enough experimenting with it to really love it. Then we have the more modern devices. And let me show you the more modern devices. Like, for instance, I have two Kobos. Both of them are not the entry-level Kobo. I have this. I think this is the Kobo HD. It's a plastic device. It's got this kind of raised bezel there, so that you've got a little bit of a natural grip. And inside the indentation of that, so exactly where your thumb very comfortably lies, are the page turn buttons. You've got page turn buttons on the side there, which is really nice. Not every e-reader has them, but this one does. Let's see here. Yeah, see what I mean? This is the aesthetic starting to take over. The bottom is completely clean. That side is completely clean. The top is completely clean. It's just on the battery end that you have the charger. And I really like it. It's a really durable thing. It was for a long time my e-reader of choice because it takes EPUB. You can just port your EPUBs over, which is really nice. And also along the same lines, one of you very kindly sent me, well, actually one of you sent me that Kobo HD, but one of you also very kindly sent me I forget the name of this thing, but it's the bigger, newer Kobo. So it's not, it's a bigger, later edition of this. I think this might be the Kobo Libra. So it also has the slight elevation there on one bezel. It's not symmetrical, so it's made to have a place for you to hold on to it. And it's got the page turn buttons, and again the completely clean design on the side, except for those lightning prongs, which allow you to attach a Bluetooth keyboard, that sort of thing, or a pencil. This is also really good. These two Kobos are really, really good. Now, I want to do, pardon the boarding house reach, I want to reach right over here. And then I also have two Kindles, the sort of industry standard thing, which I think both of these, again, were sent by viewers of this channel. You people are very, very nice. You're very generous to me. You send me stuff. And you also buy me credit at the Brattle Bookshop. It's incredibly nice. Not necessary. It's incredibly nice. Like, for instance, this one is the Kindle Oasis, which doesn't have, it's flat on the top there, but it does have the ergonomic, the asymmetrical ergonomic design of the Kobo Libra. It's just done in a different way. This is meant to facilitate you gripping it. It has page turn buttons. It's got a glass screen there with the page turn buttons, and I really, really like it. It's and for my money, probably the most comfortable, physically comfortable e-reader to use. I have only two major problems with it. They're not major. One is one that Micah mentions in his own video, which is that the higher tech on this thing, that's a higher capacitor, more storage, a better display, eats up the battery life. You can't really comfortably leave this thing down and forget about it. And you can't really read on it in a long stretch while not thinking about the battery at all. You're going to have to think about the battery, which takes you out of the reading experience. And the other thing is that it's a little too high end for somebody for the likes of me. It's a little too high end for me, so that I worry when I use it that I'm going to scratch it or crack it or something like that, which is not really the worry that I have with the e-reader that I use the most, which is the Kindle Paperwhite. This is the 2019 Kindle Paperwhite. This is not the newer one. This is not the signature edition. This also, I believe, was a gift from one of you who got the version without ads. You can pay a little extra to get a version that doesn't have any ads. So mine just has the cover of the book that I'm reading. And again, it's a completely clean periphery, except for the bottom, infamously, has the power jack, but it also has the power button. Exactly where you rest the device when you're reading it in your hand. Exactly there. So I've had to train myself not to. I've had to train myself to wedge the device between thumb and finger and leave the bottom alone, or hold it left-handed so that it's not even close. Because if you rest this on the pad of your hand, as is totally natural to do, you run the risk of doing what I've done many, many times, which is to shunt this thing into sleep mode, to hit the power button by mistake. Why that is true, aside from a mindless obedience to an aesthetic fad in the industry, the aesthetic fad in the industry is to clean the sides, have a clean periphery. There's no reason for that other than just an aesthetic fad. So why you can't have a little power button where you will not hit it by accident, I do not know. The Kobo device is actually perfect. Put it somewhere up in the back where you're never going to touch it accidentally. And I don't know if you saw, here, let me show you. The Kobo power button is not only up on the back where you can't reach it, but it's recessed. So even if you do brush against it, you're not going to push it. Like the look at all these props I've got. Like with the Nook, using the power button has to be a very intentional thing, and that's not true with the Kindle Paperwhite. It's easy to hit the power button here, but other than that, this is the dominant e-reader, dedicated e-reader anywhere in the world. It has sold more copies by far, by a factor of 5, than any other e-reader in the world. It's the standard thing. It's not the standard Kindle. There's one Kindle below, in 2019 there was one Kindle below this that didn't have the flush screen. I don't know if you can see, this is very much like an iPad. It's just a flush screen. The standard Kindle has raised bezels. They're raised just a fraction of an inch. Some people who say they don't like that say that just invites the collection of lint and dust. I always want to ask those people, where do you live that you've got that kind of a problem with lint and dust? And the screen resolution is lower on the 2019 basic Kindle than it is on the Kindle Paperwhite. This is quite possibly the platonic ideal of an electronic reader. It is tough. It's not, this is, I don't know if you can make it out on camera here, but that is not a delicate screen at all. This is not a delicate device at all. It's actually very, very, very tough and very usable. It just, say what you want about Amazon, but when they make a product, they really make something that feels natural. I have used all of these e-readers, but I go back to this over and over again. Recently had a little tech snafu with the Kindle Paperwhite, but it solved itself, so I didn't need to worry about it. I recently had a little tech snafu with it where the books in my library were not showing their covers. Not this latest innovation which Kindle has done, which is to have the resting device, when it's powered off, be the cover of the book you're currently reading. Not that, but that when I would go to my library, I would see the titles of books in empty squares with no cover art, and that bugged me. Little details like that bugged me. But anyway, I'm going to move on to the next question, for we're never going to get through this tag. You can tell I love talking about this thing, and I love hearing about it too. So I hope you all do this tag. Question number 3 is, do you read digitally on multiple devices or always on the same device? If you use multiple, how do you decide which one to use? For me, it's always a matter of ergonomics and ease of use. And so, for instance, the older Nooks that I have are not, I hauled them out for this video, but I don't use them anymore. They don't have any more memory left in them, and they're fussy. The Nook color dies very quickly on a battery charge. The Nook Simple Touch is already, its memory is completely full. I'd have to remove several books in order to add one. So those are sort of ruled out, which really leaves the 2 Kobos and the 2 Kindles. And there, it's just a question of what's under my hand when I reach out. It always manages, almost always manages to be just the simple Kindle Paperwhite. Almost always it manages to be that. And sometimes it's an iPad. I've done a lot of reading on iPads. Like I said, I'm skirting away from them for this video because they're not dedicated e-readers. Question number 4 is, do you still read physical books? If so, how do you decide which format to read a certain book in? I do, of course, still read physical books. I get tons and tons of things secondhand at the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston that do not have ebooks. I still want to dive into them, explore every last detail of them. And also, on the other end of the spectrum, there are forthcoming books. Those of you who maybe are new to the channel, I'm a book reviewer. So a large part of what I read, a huge part of what I read, is new and forthcoming releases. Not a lot of those are available. Every once in a while, I'll get an e-copy from a publisher ahead of time. I don't particularly like them because they're not mine. Most of them expire one way or another, and it's not anything that I want. I am not a fan of any kind of digital content that expires, as we're going to be getting to. So I do still read print books, absolutely. Question number 5 is, what is something you dislike about reading ebooks? I love reading ebooks and I love e-readers, but there's a lot that I dislike. There's a lot that could be improved. If these weren't the ugly stepchild of the reading world, they would already be marvelously better than they are now. For instance, I just mentioned that I don't like books that disappear on me. That's digital rights management. That's DRM. And DRM on digital books is a scandal. You put 2 smart people in a room for a day and tell them to come up with a better solution than the one that exists now in the publishing industry, they'll easily be able to do it. They'll have time left over for vaping. Right now, for instance, if you buy a book from the Amazon bookstore on your Kindle, you don't actually own it. The money that you spent on it is really a lifetime rental. But Amazon can take it back whenever they want because of the digital rights management. There are all kinds of apps and websites, programs and whatnot, hacks of all kinds to strip digital rights management software, the programming, from an ebook file. And honestly, I know that I should be siding with content creators, so to speak, here, but the digital rights management is so punitive and clumsy, so brutal, that I actually don't. I don't like any kind of precaution that assumes the worst. There's so many better ways that could be got around that than have even been explored by the publishing industry that it makes me impatient. That's one thing. Also, ebooks themselves are usually the bare minimum of what they could be. You could make them wonderful things. You could make them radically different from just an electronic copy of the text of the book. Obviously, you could. You see a hint of that with, for instance, the latest e-readers, the Nook or the Kindle, or the Kobo or the Kindle, where you can interact with the text. You can long press on a term in the text and get a definition. You can long press on a term in a book and get a sort of X-ray, I think Amazon calls it, of where that term has appeared elsewhere in the book, that sort of thing. That shows the way for a lot more features like that to make an ebook a different experience than reading. That could be improved, certainly, in a lot of ways. Also, ebooks themselves as devices could be improved. There are a lot of ways to make these things more battery efficient than they are. The battery is a miracle, but it could be a lot more of a miracle. One of the things about a book, a printed book, a paper book, is that it doesn't have a power source. So there's never a time when you're not going to be able to use it if you have a light source. Now, the ebook readers, a lot of the newer ones come with their own light source, but they need a power source as well. Anything that separates the ebook reading experience from the print and paper book reading experience is a bad thing. The industry should be working to eliminate any of those points of friction between the two experiences. I would argue that it would be, I think, fairly easy to outfit e-readers with power cells. Even just a very minimal solar power cell that is the back of the device. Instead of, a logo and whatnot. You could brand the logo into the power cell. So that you just, whenever the thing is in daylight, it's charging. Something like that would be nice. I have my quibbles with e-readers. Let's see here. Question number 6 is, would you ever ditch physical books completely and become a sole ebook reader? If yes, why? If no, why not? I would be severely tempted. I don't think I could imagine my life without printed books, but I can definitely imagine my life with only the printed books that will fit in this little room. Just these walls and nothing else, as opposed to 4 other rooms full of books. Wall to ceiling, floor to ceiling books. And maybe that's just me. Maybe that has nothing to do with, that certainly is just me. That has nothing to do with ebooks. I have, on this Kindle alone, I think I have 3,000 books. That's plenty to keep me busy. and 3,000 on every other one of these devices. And publishers do send e-copies of books, and a lot of them disappear, but a lot of them don't. Maybe it's just a question that I haven't bitten the bullet and just gotten rid of the 4 other rooms full of printed books. I don't need them. Now that I have this device in my life, I don't need them. But it can't be forever. It can't be totally, no. Unless I were unthinkably to get out of book reviewing. If I were just reading purely for pleasure, then it could easily happen. Yeah, but I don't see that ever happening until they nail my coffin shut. Then number 7 is, where do you get your ebooks? Kindle Store, library loans, third-party websites. Here I get a lot from the Kindle Store, and also Kindle Unlimited, which is an extra service that you pay for, but is really, really tempting. Also, when I say Kindle Store, I don't always mean for money. It's a sort of an unspoken reality for the Kindle Store, the Barnes & Noble Nook Store, the Kobo Store, but mainly Kindle, because Kindle is so huge. It's such a huge store, almost twice as big as the next biggest competitor. It is really easy to get a lot of totally free books. And I don't mean classics that have fallen out of copyright. I mean free books in any genre that you want. It's really easy to do. You can, of course, take a page from the Bookish Knitters, the Bookish Knitters book, and be a bargain hunter. A lot of you who complain about the high price of ebooks don't take advantage of the benefits that would accrue to you in actively bargain hunting on Amazon store alone. There are deals like crazy. Most Amazon customers, I firmly believe, don't know about those deals. But in addition to that, there's a huge amount of stuff on Amazon that's free. So there's that. I don't do library loans. I cannot stand waiting in line. I hate waiting in line. I hate it. So going onto a library website, looking at their ebook offerings, deciding on something that I want and realizing that I've got 6 weeks to wait until they can send it to my device, no. And I also, like I said, don't like it when books disappear. But third-party websites, and all of you, quite a few of you have sent me ebooks, quite a few ebooks over the years. That I have a rule on this channel: don't send me a printed book. Don't do it. I have more of them than I need. The chances are astronomical that you're going to send me something that I both want and don't already have. But you can send me ebooks all day long. You can send me as many ebooks as you want, and plenty of you have. So I've lots and lots of those. I'd say probably the number one thing for me would be either that, which I guess counts as a third-party website, or hunting around on, for instance, the Amazon ecosystem for interesting books that don't cost any money or that cost $1. And that's it. The last question here, it took us forever to get to. The last question here is to tag people. And the problem with tagging people for me is that this tag is sort of predicated on being done by someone who does have exposure to ebooks, who is at least willing to use them a little. I don't know who those people are on BookTube. So I'm tagging anybody who watches this. If you have an e-reader and you have a channel, do this tag. Absolutely. But I don't want to tag, 4 or 5 people who don't e-read at all. The tag's not for them, I would guess. So I'm tagging. I know it's lame, but I'm going to tag everybody. And I'm going to wrap this up. Good Lord, this went long. But I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.